Hello. We're waiting 15 minutes for the last people finishing their coffee and lunch to join us. So I think we can start. I know it was hard to get to the room. So hello, I'm talking under the umbrella of FICS and IDFC, two coalition of public development banks. Just started to launch a technical assistance hub to structure the offer of technical assistance for public development banks. And this topic, under the Indian presidency of the G20 in 2023, the Technical Assistance Action Plan marked kind of an important shift by emphasizing that sustainable finance is just not about mobilizing greater volumes of capital, but also ensuring its quality, accessibility, and inclusivity. So this roadmap engaged with a quite wide range of actors, from public development banks, international organizations, specialized facilities, and the concrete proposal was structured by scaling up capacity building, through tailored trainings, digital platforms, expanding blended finance instruments, guarantees, risk steering tool, green or sustainable linked bonds, and strengthening the policy frameworks, through incentive mechanisms, attached transparency. So since 2 years now, this priority has gained kind of global traction. And this year at FFD4 conference in Sevilla, I think this TA topic was brought more than 50 times into the outcome documents. And meanwhile, the G20 in Johannesburg and now COP30 in Berlin provide great opportunity to turn these goals into action. So today's session focuses on a crucial question: and how can international technical assistance and capacity building be effectively coordinated within the national policy frameworks, particularly through maybe the lens of country platform. It was quite an important topic discussed here in Berlin. So under the Finance in Common Summit, I'm happy to invite a distinguished group of experts. So I'll start with to invite James Sedemon, Head of Climate Change at the OECD, to join us and see how discussing to accessing blended finance. I'm inviting Zef Nreko, Chief Economist at GBSA, to share insight on the country platform approach. I'll invite Joachim Lette, from Head of Climate Finance at EDC Partnership. And last but not least, Koyusuke Inada, Director General for Sustainability Management at JICA. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for being here. I'll start with you, gents. So blended finance and green investment required important TA and capacity building. So from the OECD perspective, what are the most critical gaps in the current TA? How can international organizations like the OECD can help to address them, topic of TA for public development banks? Does it work? How does someone know how to?
No, I think it works. Okay. No, thank you very much for this question. Thank you for inviting me to this important discussion. Maybe let me start by saying that I think there is a very broad consensus that to achieve climate but also development goals, a significant scaling up of finance is required, and a significant part of that has to come through private finance that is mobilized. And if we look at basic data, if you look at mobilization data we have at the OECD, it's very clear that there's a key role for development banks and development finance institutions who account for about 85% of this kind of mobilization. And that is certainly multilateral development bank, but it's also bilateral, national, regional development banks. So it's a broad spectrum. Now, I think the next point that I would like to make is there's lots of discussions on, instruments, on ways to raise finance, etc. But I think this topic discussed here today is really very fundamental, because all these discussions about sometimes sophisticated, structured vehicles or instruments, they basically assume the existence of capacity that is able to, design the financial interventions and structure the right instruments. And if we look at the history of development finance and development banking, basically, mobilization has not been really a core function of that. Quite the contrary. I mean, we've conducted analysis on development banking, development finance, that basically showed us that the institutional orientation of many institutions is not really geared towards mobilization, the financial frameworks, the internal incentive structures, the corporate KPIs. Now, there's an agenda that has been changing for a while. There's quite a bit happening, but fundamentally, development banking comes out of a history that's very much focused on senior debt, certainly with regard to sovereign funding, but also if we look at mobilization or financing of private interventions, it's very much focused on the senior debt instruments that are important for sometimes facilitating investments and filling financing gap, but they're not really key to catalyzation. Now, because of that history, what you also find is that the capacity for actually taking on this evolving function within development banking is in many places very, very limited and constrained historically. And we've seen that actually through a survey of institutions themselves who said, capacity is a core challenge for many of us. And that is true even in institutions that are otherwise very well resourced and capacitated, like multilateral development banks. So capacity is really the basis on which you can, try to drive this agenda through the existing development finance institutions and development banks. And as I mentioned, there has been some examples, some experience. Actually, I think, DBSA was one of the pioneers, and we did a study that's by now also 8 years ago about, how DBSA really had a focus on catalytic mobilization. And at the same time, we still have lots of discussions across the international system how other institutions and the broader system of development banking should go forward with that. Now, the key point there really is to say that, if you want to mobilize, you require specific skill set, specific, basically capacities to really understand what needs to be done, both in terms of, the financial instruments, but also the broader financial framework and management of the institutions. And that is something that is not just as a given, because it varies quite significantly. If again you go from senior debt to a broader set of instruments, I mean, senior debt will remain very important. And also if you think about aspects like balance sheet recycling of assets that you may have. So in terms of capacity, I think it is clearly essential to build out that capacity. And I would also say it will be essential, I think, to have cooperative and collaborative approaches to that, because it's a capacity that is quite scarce and quite expensive as well, typically. So finding ways of bringing this into development banking, having support for that will be absolutely essential. I think it will also be essential to think how there's opportunity to be smart about not trying to rebuild that capacity everywhere and in every instance, because again of the cost and the price, and thinking about ways of pooling it and drawing on pooled resources that can then come in. So I would say, maybe just to conclude, I think you've very much hit the nail on the head with this discussion. Say it is absolutely essential to focus on the capacity that these institutions have for mobilization, and I think it's a great approach to have a collective, make this a collective undertaking of a group of institutions, because through that you can achieve more cost efficiency, greater scale, and also greater harmonization.
Great, thank you very much. And maybe to finish, can you tell us a little bit more about why and what is the importance of harmonization to simplify the access to blended finance for public development banks?
So I think harmonization has a double significance in this regard. One goes back to the fact that I said, I think there's important opportunity for peer learning and for exchange, and I think for having a collective approach across institutions, because if you want to invest into this mobilization, invest into capacities that are quite scarce and expensive, if you have a different approach across each institution, you're invariably coming up with a fragmented system and a silo. But the other aspect of that fragmentation is that it will basically be an impediment to mobilization, because if you want to create a market, which is at the end of the day the objective, want to bring in private finance, it will be very hard for them to navigate a landscape of development finance institutions where each institution applies a different standard and applies a different methodology and applies a different set of indicators. So the harmonization, I think, is essential for reducing transactions cost, for cost efficiency, but ultimately for the ability to scale a market where investors, at the end of the day, they, if we want this to be a size that really has a size of a portfolio of investment opportunities that really can be attractive to international finance, you need to source that from across the system of development banks, and for that it is essential that you have basically a common approach, common methodologies, harmonized standards and methodologies, because otherwise it will just remain a fragmented system that is too expensive and not worth the efforts for private finance to come in.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm asking you, Zev, so the country platforms aim to centralize TA and capacity building at the national level. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about how DBSA is helping to implement this approach in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the invitation to the panel, Constant. I want to pick up on this point of replicability and scalability of technical assistance and capacity building. I think it's quite an important point that we should think about. I mean, over the past couple of years, all of us would agree that the function or the key role of development finance, or specifically infrastructure development finance, is not just about the financing itself. I think there's the element of the early stage development in project, and there's also the later stage where you actually build and maintain project. And for me, those are the two key stages where we need to think carefully about how do we use technical assistance and capacity building in those circumstances. So I want to highlight 2 or 3 examples. You were asking for examples on how we utilize technical assistance and capacity building. The first one is around a program that we call Integrated Municipal Approach. And in this program, we realized that the functionality of municipalities is not just about giving them money and sitting at home and collecting your money. It's also about supporting them deal with other issues other than financial, governance issues, local economic development issues, and so on and so forth. So what we've done, we've set up a platform called Partner a District. So a district is a subnational government sphere. It consists of 5-6 local municipalities. So what you do, you go into that space and you diagnose the requirements, the infrastructure requirements. Then you help that district, those 5, 6 municipalities, to plan, prepare their project. Of course, you finance your IDFI, but you also help them to build structures on the ground. Now, so what that does, it allows us to not only focus on the finance, but to support the municipalities from a technical assistance and a capacity building point of view. I know, Constant, that you, the IKI program is your baby, for example. We do this in partnership with others, and we will be tapping into that program as an example to help us with municipal expertise, to help the technical assistance and capacity building. So that's the one example.
Great.
The other one is what we call development laboratories, or DLabs. What we do is we set up these precincts in either rural places, townships where people live, but predominantly underserved spaces in the economy. And we invite, so we build this thing up and we invite partners to come in and assist us. We focus on youth development, we focus on women, we focus on small enterprises and so on. So we link them, with technical expertise, we link them with trade routes, we link them with operations that they need. And the technical assistance and capacity building that goes into that is immeasurable, if you ask me, because that's exactly what they need to scale up and improve their businesses. The third one is, most of you will remember the DBSA co-hosted the Finance in Common Summit in February this year, earlier this year. The FICS lab was launched in Cape Town there, and we wanted to assess the effectiveness of voluntary carbon market financial instruments in South Africa. So that's the project that we put on the table. And we've received tremendous assistance from the CPI, Climate Policy Initiative, around this subject. The point I'm making here is the technical assistant hub. I hope that it will look into examples like this and look at what works and look at what can be taken and scaled up or elevated to a global level so that it can support and assist others. Because it is only when we incorporate lessons and solutions that work that we can all, benefit from them. Let me stop here.
Great, thank you very much. I'll give the mic to Joaquin to explain us maybe what are the priorities of the NDC partnership in supporting the public development banks through the Finance in Common community.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll probably take just 2 or 3 steps back just to position the partnership and then get to where we stand and where we are heading together now.
Great.
So the partnership was created back in 2016 by a group of developing countries, developed countries, and international organizations with the clarity that if we wanted to face and we wanted to respond effectively to the challenges and the needs for countries in terms of their mitigation and adaptation objectives, we needed to work together. It was impossible to work as individual institutions. Also, developing countries themselves were complaining a lot that, like, why do I need to talk to 70 organizations to explain over and over again what are my needs? And on the donor side is, okay, there is a lot of duplication and sometimes things that could be improved in terms of TA programs, capacity building programs, so we are more effective in delivering them. So fast forwarding, so almost 10 years on, we currently have 100 countries we've been working with. We have mobilized support for approximately 3,500 requests for assistance from our member countries through 300 institutions, members and non-members, and an amount of almost $2 billion in TA and capacity building delivered. So we've been learning as we go a lot. I think at the beginning, back in 2015-16, a lot of the focus and a lot of the climate change agenda was driven by ministries of climate change and environment. I think we've been seeing a movement that first to the sectoral ministries that have the knowledge, that have the capacities on what is happening across their sectors, but also in the last 5 to 7 years, we have worked more and more with ministries of finance, which I think is critical if we want to implement the NDCs, but they don't go through a process of understanding the fiscal impacts, understanding the impacts on growth, on debt, on economic development. I think it's very difficult to move that needle, so we've been working, to date we have approximately 50 ministries of finance that have been working with the partnership. Since 2021, we have also worked very strongly with central banks. So in the next event, we are going to talk a little bit about that program together with EIB, that is one of the biggest supporters there. And in the last 2 years, we have also supported a few public development banks. And this year in FICS, when we were there in South Africa, we had a joint event with colleagues from IDFC and FICS. We started collaborating and discussing. And they saw the model that we have. Basically, we receive those requests from countries, official government requests, and then we work with our network to mobilize that support, but very importantly, to understand what is already happening on the ground, so we build on what is already there rather than creating new programs and new initiatives. So they looked into that and said, okay, this is fantastic, that's very interesting. Can we do something similar to public development banks? And we said, yes. I mean, our member countries can request support at any time. But then we started discussing on what exactly that support could be in practice and what are the needs and how we can take that to the next level. And that's where we have, I think this last Friday or last Thursday, we jointly launched together with IDFC, FICS, and MIGA an end-to-end solution for public development banks. So that's the Public Development Bank Guarantee Hub. So the way that operates is that public development banks will get, through the NDC partnership, technical assistance support on different areas, and I understand you are going to ask that more in the next question, so I can hold it for that. But the idea is that that support can come in from the NDC partnership through a network of more than 250 members, and then once countries and the public development banks feel some of the criteria that is needed, they can tap into this guarantee that is being launched with MIGA together with AFD, EU, and others. So there are some final adjustments there on the guarantee itself, but the idea is really to offer that end-to-end solution so that public development banks can increase their liquidity, but also accessing this mega guarantee product, but also others that are out there. So the idea is really to strengthen TA support on our side, is to strengthen the capacity building and technical assistance and coordinate that, not only directly to the public development banks, which is one of the focus, but to connect with all this work that we have been doing the last 10 years in terms of supporting Ministry of Environment, sectoral ministries, Ministry of Finance, central banks, in creating this whole of government approach to climate change, right? One of the things that we've learned very, very clearly in the last years is that the project by project approach doesn't take us very far. And I think Jens mentioned a little bit about that. You need your transition plans, you need your investment plans, and you need to see what are the things that can be done on the financial side, what are the things that you need to do in terms of capacity building, but also very importantly, what are the coordination arrangements and how we can work more collectively, like as a system. So I'll stop there because I think there is a question.
Great. Well, I was about to ask more about this PDB Guarantee Hub that has a role in de-risking climate investment for PDBs, and I'd like to understand a little bit more how NDC partnership and the PDB Guarantee Hub can better align TA needs of the public development banks in order to accelerate the implementation of NDCs.
Perfect. Yeah. So the first step, I mean, we have been discussing with a lot of our members that work and provide support to public development banks. So I think a few were mentioned here. CPI, we have been working very closely with them. AFD, of course, the IDFC, TA Hub, the FICS TA Hub, also KFW and others. So the idea is to bring together these different organizations that provide that support. So once public development banks say, okay, we have this particular need, we can tap into this broad network and deliver the support. We started doing like a process to understand what would be the needs and where the public development banks have specific technical assistance support that we would like to have support from this group. And there were a few things that were already identified. So the first one is support on strengthening institutional capacities. So this might involve elements linked to governance, risk management systems, financial structuring capabilities. An area that we see a lot of gaps, and this is not only for the public development banks, but across the board on a request that the partnership receive, is on pipeline development. So really identifying but translating those ideas, those early concepts into projects that can become bankable. Also on financial structuring of specific programs and instruments that public development banks can put in place to fast track the financing of projects and programs. And also another element that came very clearly from that is the impact reporting. So the ability to measure and to report on the impact of the specific projects and programs that are in place. Two other things that link very strongly with the discussion of country platforms. So last Friday, we had the launch of the Country Platform Hub. So this is an initiative that Brazil has been championing through the G20, also now as the COP presidencies, and the idea is to create kind of like an instrument that can, not instrument, but like a collective of partners that come together to support this further alignment, coordination across different institutions. So we are working very closely there, together with IDFC and FICS, other partners such as GCBC, the GCF, and the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. So the idea is to link this work also, specifically this downstream work, also with this broader discussion on country platforms. South Africa is a champion there, back with the JETP. I think now there is also interest to launch, it was announced also an adaptation platform. So the idea is to really rally behind countries are in the lead, countries determine what they want, what they want to invest in, and you have a group of partners that come together to work on that. Final thing that I will mention is that we learned also through these different initiatives that there is a very strong appetite and interest for South-South learning. So institutions learning from their peers. So rather than like, let's say a North-South, but really like peers discussing. So for example, Brazil has their country platform, the Brazilian investment platform, South Africa has one, Indonesia has one, Vietnam has one. So they might many times have questions that maybe one has already responded to, and they come together to provide kind of that peer support and peer advice and learning. So that will be also a component of that work, working very closely with IDFC and the FICS on that as well. So all of that, as I mentioned, our work as a partnership will be very strongly focused on the TA capacity building support, but with the view of connecting to this particular guarantee hub, but also other instruments that public development banks can tap into. I'll stop there, yeah.
Thank you very much for your response, very clear. To discuss with you, Mr. Inada, I might need to show up a presentation on the screen. So I don't know how to take off the video and put the presentation. Is there someone who can do this? Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Well, Mr. Inada, so JICA has been signing the 2X challenge and has been quite active into the IDFC gender working group. So quite at the forefront of promoting gender mainstreaming in climate finance. So could you share a little bit more with us how JICA Gender Finance Tracking TA has been helping public development banks to integrate gender responsiveness into the operations of these PDBs? And don't hesitate to make me a small sign when I need to change. And as a matter of fact, the video is still there. So
okay.
Could you kindly put back the presentation? Talking to the technical group. Excuse me. Is it possible to put back the presentation, please? Is someone hearing me?
They're trying to.
I think they're trying.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So maybe I shall start. Thank you very much for inviting us. And it's a bit of a challenge to speak about gender with this unbalanced set of panel, but nonetheless, I will try to share our experience. But hopefully, so before I talk about gender, I'd like to touch upon our business model and how we integrate finance and TA. So could you go to the next slide if that's not a challenge? Yes, thank you. So sorry for the very small letters, but JICA is a very unique organization in that we have both the DFI, Public Development Bank function, and a development agency function. So at JICA, asking or emphasizing that TA is important for finance is almost like a no-brainer because we have all the instruments for technical cooperation and financial cooperation in the first place. So our central question, as you can see in the middle of this presentation, is what is the problem at hand and what mix of instrument is the optimal choice for us to support our client countries in the developing world. So, for example, if you look at the top half of the middle part of this slide, so usually governments come to us and say they want our support for strategy making, master plans, or they want to introduce some framework, a regulatory framework for a particular sector. In those cases, we usually rely on the technical cooperation where we would bring experts, consultants, or even policymakers in Japanese government to support them for several years for mobilizing these resources to help these governments create strategies and frameworks. But at the same time, if you look at the right-hand side, we do have both the sovereign loans and the private sector finance. So sometimes sovereign loans can be provided in the form of budget support to go with the technical cooperation to support the strategy or national sector plans or a framework to make sure that the governments are well endowed with financial resources to implement and enforce whatever strategies or framework they have incorporated. And if you go down the middle part of this slide, you'll see feasibility studies, project implementation, operation and maintenance, the usual issues that come up in the project execution, and the executing agencies, financial institutions, private sector are involved. In this case, the financial cooperation or our tools will play a big role, just like any other PDBs, DFIs. And now we are expanding our private sector non-sovereign instruments, and our government, or I should say our parliament, approved the amendment of JICA Act this April, and we can now provide both loans and equity and purchase of bonds issued by developing country entities, and we can also guarantee loans provided by local financial institutions to local SMEs, and we can also do blended finance. We can provide first loss support for any startups or people starting a sustainable business. So that could also be matched with our technical cooperation, and we can accept trainees from other countries to Japan. In fact, we have about 15 training centers throughout Japan where we can tailor-make a training program for whatever needs there is on the ground. And we can also help match-make training between South and South, as Joaquin mentioned. So sometimes our experience working with an Asian country to implement a strategy could be replicated in an African country. And in those cases, it's better for us to connect them rather than the African countries come to us, because maybe the Asian countries have a first-hand knowledge of what it really takes to make those strategies. So I think it's good to hear that the PDBs are now saying TAs are important, because it's actually what we've been doing for over the past several decades. So we hope to join hands with the others to enhance this model and ultimately to provide better service for all those living in the developing countries. So next slide, please. So as for gender and other cross-cutting issues, JICA has been conducting what we call the mainstreaming, meaning that our Office for Gender screens all new projects, whether it's technical cooperation or financial cooperation. They would look at all the project designs and say, what kind of gender considerations can be put into a project design. So starting from project formulation, feasibility study, all the way to project implementation, we have tools to make sure that gender aspects are built into a technical cooperation or a financial cooperation project. So this is how actually we do our business through the hub and spoke model I spoke about in the last slide, and also to make sure that cross-cutting issues like gender is built into this. And here you'll see an example from one of our projects. This is a non-sovereign private sector finance project, but if you see down at the bottom, 3, promoting women's empowerment with women-led funds. So in the process of selecting which fund we should invest for nature conservation in the Latin American region, this fund was, of course, there are other aspects that we took into account when we selected the fund managers, but this particular fund, we identified that there are gender aspects in the operation, and also if you see the 2X challenge, this is an initiative by the several DFIs to, and we set certain criteria so that we can label a certain investment as gender positive, and this particular fund qualified for that. So in order to make sure that these things are considered, as I mentioned in the last slide, we conduct mainstreaming of gender throughout all our portfolio. And next slide, please. And lastly, this is not about gender, but I mentioned that our business model is about both technical assistance and financial cooperation. So this is just an example from our energy sector, and I know you had a launch of the energy transition task force or initiative last week, but we can also add value by, for example, on the top half of this slide, there's 2 examples of our master plan energy transition in Asia. So we can dispatch experts, long-term experts and short-term experts for Indonesia or Laos or other countries to develop a long-term energy roadmap which incorporates the net zero climate transition aspects. But we can also provide training programs such as the one in the middle, which is for the mining sector, which is getting more attention to make the activities more sustainable. So there we could provide training activities, and we could mix that with master plans, strategy making, as I mentioned before, and then we can finally go to whatever projects that come up under the strategy that has been formulated, or by the people who were trained through our training program. So as you can see, this is how we do our business in Asia and other parts of the world, and hopefully we can join hands with other PDBs and technical agencies to make this type of support more general, so that climate transition will be enhanced in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So, as we reflect on today's rich discussion, there's one message that kind of stands out. Is that sustainable development finance, when kind of reimagining the TA through the classical lens of ODA, as it's accounted by the OECD, and it's not really a matter of how much we invest, but how we invest. And ensuring that these financial flows are aligned with local needs and supported by robust technical expertise and underpinned by a capacity building framework that enable its impact tracking. And so integrating this technical assistance and this capacity building into the heart of financial strategies, it requires more than only just capital, but also knowledge, coordination, accountability. So let's carry on this fruitful discussion on creating a more effective and inclusive TA within the financial architecture, and let's stay engaged with the work that is being done at the Finance in Common community and IDFC for more sustainable development. Thank you very much for your participation. Is there any question? Or we can free for the next panel coming. Oh yes, there is one.
Thank you very much. I'm Juanita Riza. I'm the director of the National Water Network of Colombia and also the focal point of the Environmental Justice Group of the ECLAC. the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean of UN. So thank you very much for this space, for sharing all your knowledge. And the question is like, how could the environmental organizations from Latin America join your different projects and plans in the region? Do they have to apply through the ministers, or to the architecture of the state, or is like direct funding on the organizations? And also, I would like to know if you are currently developing projects related with water protection specifically. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to start. So, specifically for the NDC partnership, so our membership is formed by governments and international organizations. So there are, I mean, probably two levels to that question. So one is like being part of the membership itself, and the other one is accessing the support. So on the membership, the process works as follows. Organizations, they submit their application. It needs to be not-for-profit. And then the only thing that is needed is that you have like endorsement of 2 countries. So ECLAC is a member of the partnership. So you mentioned you were part of ECLAC, so ECLAC is a member. We work very closely with them on some of our work, central banks, ministries of finance. So in a way, that is a kind of like a format for that. The other one is on the support. So the requests for support that are channeled through the partnership, they come from the governments. So once the government joins the partnership, they appoint 2 focal points. One in the ministry responsible for climate change or environment, and the other one needs to be in the Ministry of Finance, Economy, or Planning. So those are, let's say, the entry points for our engagement with the country, but the request can come from any organization in the country, provided they are channeled through the specific focal points. On water, yes, there is a lot of work on water that our members are requesting support, on policy, strategies, legislations, but more and more in terms of developing projects and getting finance for projects that involve water-related projects. So we have a specific collaboration with the Netherlands as well, focused on water and TA support, some of them that are taking place in Latin America and the Caribbean. So yeah, hopefully I answered your question, but happy to follow up later on if you want more details.
Just something on the water. Yeah, we have set up a water program office, and we're trying to assist the municipalities to deal with their water issues. So the challenge is, as you said, you can't do it on a project by project. So a program assists you to tap into these global green climate fund or GEF or whatever, to set up technical support and technical assistance for the municipalities using that program. But also it helps you to crowd in private sector capital and private sector expertise into that environment. So we find it very, very useful that way. Thank you.
Yes, and I also discussed water. So in addition to the policy making and the supporting the infrastructure, I think the important part about water is that they are also a source of disaster in many countries. And so Japan itself is a very disaster-prone country. So we do many investments in technical assistance for things like river basin management, disaster prevention. So in that context, I think we have many experiences to deal with the water. And perhaps on the NGOs, our program is mostly government to government. We do sometimes support Japanese NGOs going into certain developing countries, and there are cases where these civil society organizations work with the locals. So there could be some opportunities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for all your answers. Thank you very much for your participation. I think we can leave the floor for the next panel. Thank you again.